In 2017, the Viking Mars Missions Education and Preservation Project partnered with the Australian Youth Aerospace Association and University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia, to host the first International MarsMaker event. Young participants, their parents, the volunteers, and our staff worked together to help them devise an artistic representation of the Viking Mars lander.
So I'll hold this. Have you got your piece? Cut it further back. Can you see where the cutting bits are? That's it. Maybe
so this one, do it somehow. Okay, so it turns around like this. And you can undo Yes.
Students worked with our engineer volunteers and staff, as well as parents and others, to develop instruments and S-band antennas that had 6 degrees of freedom, load-bearing, and many other features to match as many of the Viking lander requirements as they could.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent work.
It's being stuffy at the moment, but... Can you grab some more, please?
Students got very creative, using nuts and bolts not only for the engineering, but also to label the various parts of the Viking lander.
That looks awesome.
The activity was meant to be both creative and to create opportunities for critical thinking and to learn engineering skills such as process design, instrumentation development, all the while learning about the details of the Viking mission to Mars.
Well, I don't think it's going to stick.
Fuel cells. Oh, we need power, don't we, to go somewhere? Excellent.
The Australian Youth Aerospace Association students worked with the Viking Mars Missions Education and Preservation Project staff to find scrap that would be appropriate for the build.
now we have.
During that process, the aerospace students learned greater detail about the Viking mission itself, so they could in turn share that with future generations. They learned about thermal layers. They also learned about the materials that were used to develop the legs, the various instruments, the retro rockets, and much, much more.
Oh, yeah. All right. That's good.
It was also a true engineering challenge for the students, as they had to figure out how to make the body fully load-bearing, using only scrap materials. This was not easy, and it took a lot of testing. But at the end of the day, it supported over 70 pounds of weight.
Yeah, that'd be the best. But how thick is the plywood? Yeah, because we don't have a lot to play with the.
work and very much a little piece of it.
During the process of designing the legs, the students had to work really hard to practice real-time lessons of teamwork and critical thinking. It was a challenge not only for our participants, but also for our volunteers.
Oh, no, it's all three of these blocks.
What do we need? This bolt's huge.
Yeah, I want to use those bolts on the feet.
Okay.
But like that's just my personal. They come from the X Labs. The shock shoes. Oh right. Oh, so they're just steel. Yeah. No. They're cast iron. They'll be cast and cut this out. That's a roll. That's a rolled.
This one here,
And his name is Mr. Tom Bilbo,
Bilbo, B-I-L-B-O.
and he was at JPL?
Yes, he was the SFOF manager, Space Flight Operations Facility Manager, the big building in which the Viking
Right.
team resided.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he provided all of that.
Okay.
July 20, 1969, it was the 21st here, Neil Armstrong became the first human being to set foot on the moon. Fellow astronaut Edwin Buzz Aldrin was second. Some Australians played a crucial role in the Apollo 11 mission, and in Canberra, Rob Muir talked to some of those involved.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start.
July 16, 1969. At Cape Kennedy in Florida, it was 9:32 a.m. when Apollo 11, watched by millions of people around the world, blasted off on an odyssey that would turn science fiction into fact.
Houston, thrusters go. All engines, you're looking good.
Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins would spend the next 4 days in space, preparing for a landing that no one could be certain would be successful. However, all had gone according to plan so far, and both mission control and the astronauts were confident.
Picking up some dust. Base shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. The Eagle has landed.
Looking back on it, when we were told, only perhaps 9 months before the actual landing, that it could occur as soon as that date, I really didn't think it could be achieved to the timescale, but it was.
Mike Dinn, now director of the Tidbinbilla tracking station near Canberra, remembers it well. He was one of a large Australian contingent at the now defunct Honeysuckle Creek station. Their job was to monitor and disseminate various data coming from the astronauts, and to ensure that the rest of the world could see what was taking place.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It was very exciting. The very first time the television picture came down, we were waiting. The astronaut Aldrin had to push a circuit breaker in on the lunar module. and everyone was getting jittery that it hadn't occurred on time, and we were starting to wonder if we had a problem, but it wasn't. It was just a question of configuring the switches in the lunar module. And the first TV that was released to the world actually came from the Honeysuckle Creek tracking antenna, which still happens to be out here at Tidbinbilla. The TV was seen in Australia, of course, a fraction of a second before the rest of the world, because it was released out of Sydney and distributed within Australia, then sent off across the Pacific to Houston and distributed from there to the rest of the world.
Alongside Mike Dinn 20 years ago was Laurie Turner.
In those days I was a telemetry supervisor, looking after the equipment that decoded the telemetry that was coming down, and part of that was the astronauts' heartbeat and their respiratory rate. And we had it on a recorder, a paper recorder. In doing that, I kept on. And that's the actual heartbeat at the time you stepped down.
Neil Armstrong's heart wasn't the only one that was pounding. For Laurie, who still takes the occasional nostalgic look at the log from that night, there will probably never be another moment in his lifetime to match that one.
All the excitement went out of it, and the exciting parts of deep space is when we have encounters with planets, but it's 3 or 4 years between each happening, whereas that during Apollo missions was happening all the time.
So space travel ain't what it used to be?
It certainly isn't.
Do you miss it?
Yes, I do, yes.
In the last 20 years, the Americans have focused more on the exploration of deep space and development of the space shuttle than exploitation of the moon. For Mike, Laurie and co, the next big space thrill will come on August the 25th, when the Explorer 2 probe sends the first close-up pictures of Neptune via Australia to the world.